Today's movie is inspired by real events from the 1980s, centered around a young man named Yossi. After completing his military duty, Yossi feels the urge to explore new destinations, so he sets off for South America. There, he crosses paths with Marcus, another young man, and they decide to continue their travels together, starting with a camping trip in the jungle. During their stay, Yossi notices a girl and feels an instant attraction, which seems mutual. Later, Marcus reconnects with an old friend, Kevin, a documentary filmmaker. After introductions, Yossi, Marcus, and Kevin agree to travel as a group. Yossi and the girl share stories, including how his father disapproved of his love for travel and adventure. On their last day at the camp, Yossi says goodbye to her and heads to a nearby city with his friends. While exploring the city, Yossi encounters Carl, a local traveler, who invites him to join a camping trip deep into the Amazon rainforest. Carl explains that the journey would let them explore untouched areas, meet indigenous tribes, and possibly find gold in the river winding through the forest. Carl's photos from previous trips captivate Yossi. He shares Carl's idea with Marcus and Kevin, who initially hesitate, as their trip is nearing its end. Yet Yossi persuades them, and they decide to extend their travels for this new adventure. The group meets Carl again, who advises them to leave behind valuables for safety in the jungle. Yossi also brings along a Bible his late uncle gave him for protection. With the trip underway, everyone feels thrilled, especially Kevin, who hopes to capture rare shots for a chance with National Geographic. Yossi's eager to search for gold, while Marcus joins in, mainly to avoid being left behind. Carl speaks passionately about the beauty of nature and its wonders. That night, the group sets up camp in the jungle, but they're startled awake when Marcus suddenly lets out a terrified scream in the middle of the night, jolting everyone out of their sleep. He explains that he felt an insect crawling across his face. Carl identifies it as a potentially dangerous bug, but laughs it off, teasing Marcus and calling him a coward for overreacting. The following day, Carl urges everyone to pick up the pace, warning them that rain is on the way. Kevin, however, mocks Carl's prediction, pointing out that it's summertime and highly unlikely to rain. But just as Carl anticipated, rain begins to pour down, forcing them to set up another makeshift camp. Following the man's directions, they eventually come across Carl standing on a hill overlooking a nearby tribal village. Frustrated, Yossi confronts Carl, questioning why he abandoned them. Carl calmly replies that he wanted them to experience a taste of adventure on their own. Relieved, they proceed to the village, where the tribe welcomes them warmly, inviting them to stay for a few days. After resting with the tribe, they decide to push on, aiming to visit other tribes deeper in the jungle. One evening, they set up camp by the river, and Yossi stumbles upon actual gold in the riverbed, sparking excitement in the group. Just as Carl promised, they also witness breathtaking natural phenomena, which Kevin eagerly captures in photographs, hoping they'll help advance his career. At one point, Carl spots a monkey in the trees, and to the group's surprise, decides to hunt it for dinner. He kills the monkey in a brutal fashion, shocking everyone with his apparent lack of empathy. Carl then roasts the monkey over the fire and offers it to the group. Driven by hunger, Kevin reluctantly tries it first and is surprised by how good it tastes. Yossi, encouraged by Kevin's reaction, decides to try some as well, but Marcus is disgusted and refuses to eat it. The next day, Marcus begins showing signs of extreme exhaustion, struggling to keep up with the group. Concerned, they decide to rest while Carl attends to a serious wound on Marcus's foot, which has become severely infected due to the harsh terrain. The relentless trek through the jungle becomes overwhelming for Marcus, so the group decides to help by carrying his gear. However, they begin to feel as though his slow pace is holding them back, which leads to growing frustration. Sensing their impatience, Marcus feels increasingly distanced from his friends. He apologizes to Yossi, who assures him that their friendship hasn't changed and that they're still close. But as Yossi walks away, Marcus breaks down in tears, feeling emotionally isolated from the group. The following day, the four of them gather to discuss how they might continue with Marcus's injury holding them back. Kevin suggests they should return to the city and end the trip, reasoning that it might be safer. But Carl disagrees, arguing that they have come too far to turn back and that the nearest tribe is actually closer than the city. Despite Carl's insistence, it's clear that Marcus won't be able to walk much further. Kevin then proposes an alternative, building a small raft to travel downriver, which would allow them to reach the tribe without putting further strain on Marcus's injury. Yossi and Marcus support the idea, but Carl appears visibly anxious, showing a reluctance to go along with the plan. Overruled by the others, Carl has no choice but to help build the raft. Before they set off, Carl gives the group strict instructions. They must stay in the center of the river and steer towards the shore if the current gets too strong, as failing to do so could lead to disaster. They embark on their river journey, which begins smoothly with calm waters, lulling them into a sense of security. But as they progress, the current intensifies, and the raft becomes increasingly unstable, threatening to tip over. Carl grows visibly anxious and starts giving urgent instructions, trying to keep them safe in the fast-moving waters. However, Kevin grows suspicious of Carl's motives, feeling as though Carl is attempting to control the group and questioning whether Carl truly knows what he's doing. Tensions flare, and the two get into a heated argument. Yossi steps in, attempting to de-escalate the situation and urging them to focus on steering. Eventually, they manage to reach the shore without any injuries, narrowly avoiding what could have been a dangerous accident. Once on solid ground, Carl insists they camp there for the night, refusing to continue further downriver. Without explanation, he wanders off alone, leaving the others behind. As they watch him disappear into the distance, doubts start to creep in among the group, sparking a sense of mistrust towards Carl's true intentions. Carl's fear of the river becomes evident when he reveals he can't swim, explaining his earlier reluctance to continue. Later, as they search for him in the forest, a sudden gunshot startles them. Carl explains that he fired his gun to scare off a jaguar that had been approaching Yossi, attempting to protect him from danger. The next day, the group prepares to continue downriver. But Carl, still uneasy about the river, announces he'll be returning to the city on foot through the forest rather than taking further risks. With Carl's decision, Yossi and Kevin agree to proceed downriver, while Marcus, due to his injuries and slower pace, is encouraged to accompany Carl back to the city. Kevin doesn't want Marcus slowing them down, and Yossi agrees but approaches Marcus diplomatically, cleverly suggesting that it would be safer for him to return with Carl. He even hints that Kevin might lead them astray, implying someone dependable should ensure Carl's safe return. This subtle persuasion works, and Marcus, concerned about Kevin's impulsive nature, decides to accompany Carl, feeling reassured and grateful to Yossi for his apparent sacrifice. With the decision made, the group makes final preparations. Carl advises Yossi and Kevin to avoid entering the canyon at all costs and to stay centered in the river until they reach the tribe. He emphasizes caution, warning them to camp on the shore if the current strengthens, as navigating rough waters could be life-threatening. Carl provides them with a map, and they divide supplies equally. After heartfelt farewells, each group sets out on their separate journeys. Initially, Yossi and Kevin's river journey is calm and productive, allowing them to cover significant distance with the gentle current. They establish a system to take turns steering the boat and resting. When Yossi's turn to sleep arrives, he dozes off while Kevin takes over navigation. However, as the river flows deeper into the jungle, Kevin notices a sudden increase in the current's speed. Before he can wake Yossi to help, the water begins to churn around them, growing more turbulent by the second. The intensifying current threatens their control of the boat, setting a dangerous course downriver and pushing Kevin's resolve to its limit. Both men struggled to steer it toward the shore, aiming to avoid the canyon, but the powerful current seized control. The boat was eventually hurled against a large rock, forcing them to cling to it desperately to avoid being swept away. Kevin reassured Yossi, saying he would swim to shore to find a rope and bring help. Despite Yossi's fear, he felt comforted by Kevin's promise not to abandon him. As Kevin started toward the shore, the current surged, causing the boat to slip off the rock and Yossi to fall into the river. In the powerful current, Yossi was quickly carried away, unable to swim or control his direction until he finally managed to reach the riverbank. Climbing onto a nearby hill, he called out for Kevin, hoping for a response, but there was only silence. Exhausted, he sat down and drifted into sleep. When he awoke, he spotted his bag floating in the river. Quickly grabbing it, he found his Bible and energy pills from Carl. He took one pill, which gave him enough strength to resume his search. Determined, Yossi continued through the forest, following the river and calling Kevin's name in every direction. though there was no answer or trace of him. Frustrated, he decided to map his path and leave the map, along with his shirt, on a hill as a signal for Kevin in case he was searching nearby. Yossi continued his journey through the jungle, and as 6 days passed, his food ran out and his energy waned. He decided to set up camp beneath a large tree for the night. In his sleep, he dreamed he was sitting in a restaurant, ravenously eating everything on his plate. He was jolted awake by the faint sound of someone calling his name. Groggy, he imagined that Marcus was there in front of him, reaching out to him. When he shone his flashlight in the direction of the sound, no one was there. His attention shifted as he noticed movement in the nearby trees. He could just make out the form of a wild tiger approaching. Panicking, he tried to use his gas and set a fire to ward it off. But as the light flared, he realized it had all been an illusion. He was alone. The tiger and Marcus were just hallucinations, likely from hunger, exhaustion, and his time alone in the jungle. The next day, Yossi noticed painful swelling on his forehead. As he examined it using his medical kit, a large worm suddenly emerged from the swollen area, crawling out of his skin. Despite the horror and revulsion, Yossi forced himself to push forward. A short while later, he saw a chopped-down tree in the forest and felt a surge of hope that he might be near human settlement. Searching the area, he found a nest filled with eggs under a tree. Driven by hunger, he had no choice but to eat them, feeling slightly revived by the meager meal. Finally, Yossi reached what appeared to be the tribal area he had been aiming for, but his relief turned to despair as he saw the site was destroyed. Tents were torn down, and the area bore signs of an attack, with no people in sight. Crushed by this discovery, he decided to change course and head toward a more distant tribe. However, he soon realized that the injuries in his legs were severe from the days of relentless walking, and he feared he wouldn't make it. Reflecting on the separation from his friend, he began to feel guilt over what Marcus might have endured. He wished Marcus were there so he could apologize, hoping that his friend hadn't blamed him for their separation. At dawn, Yossi's injuries forced him to limp, but he had no other choice but to continue. He soon spotted footprints along the path, and hope reignited within him as he thought he might be close to others. But as he looked closer, he was horrified to realize they were his own footprints from the day before. Yossi felt frustration and helplessness as he realized he was moving in circles, trapped in an endless loop. In that moment, he remembered his father's words, trying to find strength to push onward despite the overwhelming odds. When Yossi recalls his father's disapproval of the trip, his stern opposition to Yossi's adventurous plans, and even his refusal to provide any financial support, he begins to regret not heeding that advice. Now he realizes that his stubbornness and hunger for adventure have left him stranded in the jungle. As he resolves to press on, a sudden downpour forces him to find shelter under a tree. After the rain subsides, Yossi drifts into sleep and dreams of his life back in America, the comfort and luxury he once enjoyed. At dawn, a local hunter and his young son walk toward the river and are shocked to find Yossi, unconscious and utterly drained, lying on the shore. They carry him back to their tribe, tending to his wounds and nursing him back to health. After a few days, when Kevin regains his strength, he reaches out to local authorities within the tribe, pleading for their assistance in searching for his missing friend Yossi. The officer agrees to help and arranges for Kevin to survey the jungle by plane. From above, Yossi spots the plane and waves frantically, shouting to catch Kevin's attention. But the plane flies too high, and Kevin doesn't see him. Back on the ground, Kevin tells the officer that the plane's altitude made it impossible to locate Yossi properly. He asks the officer for permission to search along the river, but the officer refuses, believing that Yossi must have perished after 3 weeks in the jungle. Kevin, however, is convinced that Yossi is still alive. The officer then directs Kevin to an experienced local hunter who knows every inch of the jungle. Kevin asks the hunter to help search, but the man initially refuses. Undeterred, Kevin offers to buy a boat and head out alone. Impressed by Kevin's determination, the hunter eventually agrees to join him, and together they embark on their quest to find Yossi. Meanwhile, Yossi, now nearly drained of all hope and strength, suddenly hears the sound of someone crying nearby. Following the sound, he finds a young girl who seems lost, and her presence renews his hope. He reassures her, promising to help her find her way back to her tribe. As they journey together, he speaks to her, even though she doesn't understand his language. and feels a profound sense of comfort from simply having someone with him after weeks of solitude. When night falls, Yossi tells her to sleep and promises to protect her. As dawn breaks, he finds her sleeping beside him, but when he wakes, he discovers she's gone, and he realizes she was only a figment of his imagination, a hallucination brought on by his intense isolation and exhaustion. As Yossi continues his arduous journey through the jungle, he stumbles into a mud pit. Exhausted and with no strength left, he is unable to pull himself out. Succumbing to his weariness, he falls asleep and dreams of his uncle giving him a Bible, a symbol of protection and guidance. Upon waking, Yossi, inspired by the dream, musters the last of his strength, grabs onto a nearby tree branch, and manages to pull himself free from the mud. Nearby, he notices a tree crawling with fire ants and comes up with a desperate plan. He allows the ants to sting him, hoping the intense pain will invigorate him enough to continue moving. The excruciating bites fuel his determination, and Yossi runs until he reaches a riverbank. There he constructs a signal out of wood, hoping it will catch the attention of passing hunters or rescuers. The next day, Kevin arrives at the riverbank with the hunter and spots the signal Yossi left behind. However, they don't immediately find Yossi himself. Overcome with despair, Kevin begins to believe that Yossi might not have survived. He reluctantly prepares to return to the tribe. At the same time, Yossi, lying weakly beneath a tree nearby, hears the sound of the boat. Summoning all his remaining strength, he tries to call out but can barely make a sound. Just as Kevin is about to leave, he notices Yossi standing weakly on the shore. Overjoyed, Kevin yells to the hunter to turn the boat around. Finally, after 19 grueling days lost in the jungle, Kevin and Yossi are reunited. Kevin embraces Yossi, overwhelmed with relief, thanking him for surviving and keeping his promise. The two return to the tribe, where Yossi is celebrated and warmly welcomed. After recovering, Yossi and Kevin head back to the city, hoping to reunite with Marcus and Carl. However, they are shocked to learn that neither of them ever made it to the city. Despite weeks of searching, there is no trace of the pair, and no one has reported seeing them. When Yossi and Kevin consult the police, they are stunned to discover that Carl was actually wanted by the authorities for deceiving tourists. In the end, Carl and Marcus remain missing, their fates unknown, and so concludes the story, leaving behind a haunting mystery. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content.